Chapter 19 Midnight Waltz. The Kawanan encampment had a large marketplace on the north end filled with open-air shops and restaurants, while a shimmering pond fed by the waterfall's winding stream acted as the centerpiece. Elwin had asked for directions from a few children, two being Kawanan twins while the other was a tiny centaur. While initially Elwin thought the trio of kids would simply tell her how to get to her destination, instead they followed her the whole way. Now they were virtually inseparable from their new friend. Leading Elwin from store to store, they talked and squealed among one another, showing her the various things they liked and wanted to buy. The two Kawanan twins, despite being only 5 years of age, already possessed shifter ears, streaks, and jewelry. They tumbled amongst each other in dragon form, biting at their ears when they got into a petty argument, and trotting around the pond on stubby paws. Their centaur friend followed them in fits of giggles, watching in amusement as they fought. Elwin managed to break up the tussle by buying them candy sweets. The attitude many of the people in the area had toward Elwin varied greatly from person to person. Some welcomed her with open arms, even giving her welcome gifts. Others simply stared in disgust. One Kawanan dragon tending to a wood-carving stand was so angry upon seeing her that he looked about ready to blow fire in her direction. Elwin quickly led herself and the kids away. By the time night fully enveloped itself over the land, Elwin had purchased a dress, a satchel, a pair of boots, a sun hat, a couple of interesting novels, a brush, and a comb. However, there was one last shop hanging at the edge of the clearing that caught her eye. It was a circular tent propped up against a particularly thick redwood tree. The open flaps featured magical holograms that projected sparkles into the air like fireworks. The exterior of the tent was painted with random splatters, as if the artist simply flung the paint here and there without a care in the world. An art shop, the interior was even more interesting and bursting with personality. Jars of paint lined the back wall, organized into stacked towers separated by kind and color. Several flower vases bloomed with bristly paintbrushes, while glues and crafting materials burst from velvet-lined chests. Each object in the store sold was displayed as if it were the greatest treasure in the land. Even the interior walls were lavishly painted with royal, lush scenes of palace gardens and famous artists of old. Elwin brushed her hand against the paintbrush's tips. The store owner was the old man Sphinx she had seen a few times before. He gave a fanged smile and padded toward her from behind his low desk. "In the market for art supplies, Miss Lyrial Spawn?" Elwin was confused by what he had called her at first, until she remembered the tendency of sphinxes to address others by their parents' names. In this case, while it may have sounded like an insult to a normal shifter, in reality it was simply a formality in the sphinx culture. "I suppose. You have such a lovely shop here that I could not help but to take a look within," Elwin said, regaining her formal wording. "By what name shall I address you?" The Sphinx gave a happy chortle. "I am called Renos' father, parent of 3 cubs. You may address me as Renos. We are having a sale today, if you have interest. Drawing pencils are half off if a book of sketching papers is bought with them." Elwin nodded, diving deeper into the store. The children, who had been quiet thus far, followed behind a bit before branching off and examining different things. The little centaur girl conversed with the Sphinx, who laughed at her innocent questions concerning the nature of creating art. Elwin snatched up a medium-sized sketchbook and grabbed a few graphite pencils, taking them to the checkout desk. Her eyes wandered around the canvas-bordered room. She would have stayed longer if she wasn't so eager to get back to her tent. Renos took her coins and nodded. The Kawanan twins jumped up while trying to pull down the canvases above. Elwin shooed them out before any damage was done. Now that the shops were closing down, the children decided to finally say their goodbyes. For her last stop, Elwin got a meal at Chev's small bakery tent. Back at her guest tent, after setting up her things in a fashion tailored to her tastes, she sat down on her bed and ate. She was silent, alone with her thoughts. With so many undesirable things to think about, this was a dangerous state to be in. For distraction, Elwin cracked open one of her new books. It featured wonderfully detailed illustrations depicting the muscle and bone structures of various dragons. Large paragraphs next to arrows marking various body parts relayed helpful information about the inner workings of the creatures. Elwin absorbed both food and knowledge while crickets sang their repetitive songs outdoors. Footsteps sounded outside. Elwin looked up to see Gerald's face peeking through the tent flaps. "Hey." Usually, one knocks when entering the abode of a lady. The corner of Elwin's mouth rose in tandem with an eyebrow. "It's a tent, m'lady." Gerald strode in, sitting beside her. "Figured you'd be lonely. Thought I could join you for a bit. How's it going?" Elwin shrugged. She groaned, closing her book. Gerald nodded. "Yeah, I get it." He sighed. "Any news on the Green Dragon?" Elwin finished up her last bite of the salad. "Mom and the team quit for the night. They're pretty much sure that his wings will have to be amputated. They're in horrible shape." Gerald scratched his head. "What will that do to him? If he turns human, I mean." Elwin flipped her hair over her back. "Will anything change?" "Well, the wing matter comes from part of his human ribs and back vertebrae. Shoulder muscles, too. His human form will have chronic back problems, and won't have a full range of motion in his arms. Some skin might be missing, initially, but will grow back." Elwin bit her lip. "That's not good. He'll still be healthy, though, right?" "Hopefully. His front leg was salvageable and will be good as new in time." Gerald popped a buttered roll into his mouth at Elwin's silent chagrin. "By the way, I was wondering about your father," Elwin said. "While I know your mother is the head physician, I've been wondering if your father is the head of the village. He seems to be the one taking charge of the mission to restore the memories of the former rebellion leaders." "Oh, Dad's not the leader of the encampment. That job belongs to Arwista. She's the chiefess. Dad, however, was the co-leader of the rebellion, along with Mom. He used to fight alongside all of those people we're restoring. It was actually because of a fight with a witch near the end of the rebellion that he became blind. That pretty much took him out of the picture, and Mom became the sole leader for a while until Dad recovered. But by then, everything had fallen apart. I was just a kid when it all happened." "He must have been very brave to face off with a witch like that." Gerald leaned back onto a tent pole, his arms crossed behind his head. "He ended up winning the fight, actually. Cut her head clean off, despite his face wound. It was incredible to watch, from what Mom told me. Dad's an awesome guy. Too bad he's angry with me." "I'm sure we'll convince him to let you go. You will be sorely needed during the expedition, not only as a hunter, but as a good conversation partner and provider of entertainment." The two teens smiled and giggled simultaneously, a sense of kinship rekindling between them. "Hey, what's that?" Gerald pointed to the sketchbook sitting delicately on the low table. 4 sharpened pencils sat in a row beside it. "Oh, well, I used to do a lot of sketching in the castle gardens. It was always a favorite hobby of mine. I decided to go ahead and get a sketchbook as a way to calm myself down if need be." Gerald swept up the book in his hands, flipping through the empty pages. "Hey, that's awesome! Can you draw me something?" Like what?" Elwin took the book back, flipping to the front page. "Like a, guy. Me, maybe?" Gerald grinned. Elwin rolled her eyes. "You know what? I don't feel like drawing anymore." Gerald guffawed, slapping his still healing thigh. He cried out in pain once he realized what he'd done. Elwin winced and waited for him to calm down. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, sorry to burst the mood." He sighed. Elwin looked down, an idea suddenly blossoming in her mind. She blushed at the thought, but slowly liked the idea more and more. Should I even suggest such a thing? I guess it could help in the long run. Elwin set the sketchbook back on the table. "Hey, if you end up joining us on the journey, you'll have to learn how to act during a high society ball." "Good point. Not something I'd say I particularly want to learn, though." Gerald shrugged. "A big part of a ball is the dancing. If your leg is feeling up to it, I could teach you how to waltz." Gerald raised an eyebrow. "Well, I guess so. Want to start tonight?" "Tonight?" Elwin cried. "It's getting pretty late." "To be honest, I don't really want people to know I'm learning to dance, especially my sister. I wouldn't hear the end of it. Besides, there's a place I know not too far from here that would be perfect.
I've been waiting to show it to you anyway.
All right, let me just get ready. Elwin slipped on her shoes and tidied up her hair a bit. The two slipped out into the night, the cricket buzzing growing louder.
Shift into dragon form. It's much quicker to fly there, Gerald said.
Elwin obeyed, quickly changing forms. She was amazed at how easy it was. Unlike the first time she had changed from human to dragon, this felt natural. It was a part of her being all along, and now that she could use it, she almost felt more complete somehow. She spread her wings, and Gerald clambered onto her back. Rocketing into the sky, she let a warm night breeze carry her upward. Gerald guided her a ways beyond the edge of the encampment, past some of the tallest redwood trees in the area. She flew over them with some difficulty, rising just over their tips. This is some kind of pocket dimension, right? How big is it anyway? Elwin wondered aloud.
We're nearing the edge, actually. If you go past the border, you plop right back into the regular world. The only way to get back in is through the waterfall, Gerald explained.
Oh, there. Land right there. Elwin made a shaky descent, pounding down onto the soft grass. She lifted her head as her eyes examined the area in wonder. It wasn't just a normal clearing. The trees surrounding the place were not redwoods like most of the forest. Rather, they were shorter, willow-like trees. Their sweeping leaves danced gently in the almost unnoticeable breeze. Little points of light sprouted from their branches in globular pods. They sparkled in colors of blue, purple, and all of the hues in between. Lime green grass shaped like the silhouette of a spoon burst in long stalks from the ground, sweeping across the clearing. A pond in the center slipped into a stream, which arced around the edge of the clearing and then dove into the thick of the trees and continued onward. The water was eerily glowing a light blue laced with lines of deep purple. What is this place? Elwin breathed. It's amazing.
My hangout spot. I come out here when I want to practice violin or just get away from everyone. That water is filled with glowing plankton, which makes it glow like that. The trees are rare phosphorus-based plants that sprout what look like the abdomens of fireflies. That's why they're called firepoint trees. Gerald dismounted and walked towards the iridescent pond. He dipped a hand in. It became covered in plankton and glowed like a dim lantern when pulled out. Gerald grinned, wiping his hand on Elwin's front leg. Gerald! She jokingly shoved him aside, then wiped the glowing residue on the grass. She pranced around the beautiful illuminated area, taking in the wonderful sights. Her horns brushed against pods of purple and blue. You seem to know a lot about the flora and fauna here. Is that something that interests you? Gerald nodded. Besides smithing and hunting, I really like studying animals and plants. You could say I'm kind of into biology and other fields that involve how nature works. Elwin's mind flashed back to Jane Florence and her irrational hatred for the field. That's very interesting. Do you plan to take that on as a job when you get older? Gerald shrugged and wandered over to a tree at the perimeter of the pond. He reached behind it, bringing out a wooden box. Contained within was his violin. He put it to his shoulder, playing the same waltzing tune from the waterfall. This is the kind of music they play at balls, right? The 1, 2, 3 kind of thing? Elwin nodded. She rose up on her hind legs, her body shaping itself into human form and her dress materializing back around her. She looked up, tucking her hair behind her long ears. That is the kind of music, though it's usually a bit more lively. Gerald played a good bit of the tune over again, this time quicker. He snapped his fingers, and the instrument floated out of his hands, playing the same section over automatically. He sidled up to the bewildered Elwin, the notes filling the clearing. Is that really something you can do with magic? Elwin asked. That's amazing? Yeah. I actually invented that spell a while ago when I was practicing and wanted to hear what I just played over again. I'm sure someone else has thought of it before, but I was still pretty proud of myself. In any case, should we begin? Elwin took a deep breath. Yes. First is proper positioning. She grasped her right hand to his left, positioning his hand around her waist. Her left fingers curled around his shoulder. Both stood stiffly, looking away from one another's eyes. She continued. Okay. Now, move your feet from here to here while I follow behind.
As you step, let your motions follow the 1-2-3 pattern of the music. Elwin demonstrated for him. He nodded. The two stepped from pose to pose, rigidly following the motions. The violin's tune played on in repeat. Stars twinkled softly from above, framing the silver moon. The sky remained a hue of dark purple and swiftly changing gradient to deep blue as it dipped to the horizon. Time seemed to stand still, and even the breeze came to a stop. Moonlight beamed through branches of pod-laden trees and onto the two dancers. The pattern became easier for Gerald to follow. Heartbeats attuned to one another, muscles relaxed. Nimbly, they circled the patch of grass with tiptoeing feet. Misty night air kissed blood-filled cheeks. Elwin closed her eyes and let out her breath. Hesitatingly, she let herself sink into his arms. It had been so long since she had embraced someone last. The warmth of another human being and the quickly cooling air of the evening seemed so necessary at that moment. Something she needed. Wordlessly, Elwin pressed herself against her partner. He sucked in a breath in response. Chin hooked over his shoulder, Elwin entwined her arms around him. The music stopped. All was quiet. Gerald hugged her back, his hands pressing against her spine and his brows lowered in concern. Her breath was now haggard, and for some unknown reason, she was weeping. The full version of this book, Dragon Queen Scarlet Rain, is available for purchase in both ebook and paperback versions on Amazon.